What a crowd. I think we'll take up 3 collections today. This morning, I'm going to do something which I never thought I would do. So I'm going to ask your pardon before I do it. I'm going to suggest that you read the New York Times. Forgive me. Don't buy it. Go online. Or maybe if you know somebody that has bought it, take a picture of the article that I'm going to recommend to you. There's a very, very good article in the opinion section this morning. It's written by a man named Ross Douthat. And it talks about the importance of reading the Gospels. How if we just take the time to read the Gospels, especially when we get to these Gospels talking about the passion and the resurrection, we can really get a sense as to how real the message is, how real the instances are that the Gospels are reporting on. Let's take a look at this morning's Gospel and let's see how real these events are. They betray themselves in very, sometimes unusual ways. This gospel is written by John. And John is a braggart. Did you know that? He was always bragging about that Jesus loved him best. He calls himself the beloved disciple. And he talks about the women coming to him and Peter on the first day of the week, the morning of the resurrection, the first Easter. And the women came to tell them that the tomb was empty. Now, women did not count as valid witnesses in those days. You know why? They said, oh, they're just hysterical. They're imagining this. So you needed 2 male witnesses. So you have Peter and John. They are the 2 male witnesses. So right away, you're getting a sense that, this is real because this is what it was like in those days. What happens then is also very telling. And it's this. It says when the women reported this to Peter and John, that they began to run to the tomb. And then it says, very tellingly, it says, but I, the beloved disciple, got there first. Now, this is very believable. Why? Let me tell you the facts as to why. Did you ever watch the boys' track team run? They are swift as rabbits. Now, tradition has it that John was the youngest of the disciples, so he was about 17 years old. Peter was about my age, 35 years old. Now, who do you think is going to win that race? Very telling. It's hidden right in there. But there's something else. There's something else hidden in there. It's this. If you know 17-year-old boys, they brag a lot. They talk a good game, but they're little babies. They're a little chicken underneath the skin. So I had asked some of the boys at Newman one day, I said, suppose somebody said to you that, hey, did you hear what happened at the cemetery? A grave opened up, and they say that somebody came out of the grave. And it happens to be early in the morning. It's still kind of dark and cloudy. Would you go into the cemetery? That's the answer. So what's happening with John and Peter? John was scared, and he waited for Peter to get there. He makes it look like a great act of respect because Peter is the apostle that Jesus puts in charge of the flock. So he makes it look like he's showing respect to Peter. Peter, after you. See? And that's what happened. Reminds me of talking to one of my brothers. I said to him, you know, we have one more plot in the grave where our parents are. So he looked at me and he says, after you. So they're real. They're real. You got to read them. And, no matter how repulsive it might be to you, take a look at what Ross Douthat says in the New York Times. For once, me and that newspaper agree on something. Now, it's very hard for us to get a grasp of what it must have been like or felt like that morning of the first day of the week, the resurrection. What did they feel? Well, John once again is bragging about himself. He says at the end, he saw and he believed. John saw and he believed, and he calls himself really the first believer. How do you like that? He gets his points in so many different ways. All right. Okay. What did he feel? What was it like? What was it like? Let me tell you a story. When I was a little boy, we had a lady that lived upstairs from us. She had come from Germany, Grandma Kraus. And I can remember Grandma telling the story about her brother. Now, she was the last of about 8 children. And this brother was naturally a lot older than she, and he became a professor at the University of Berlin. But during this time period, the Nazis had taken over Germany. Remember, Berlin was a place where they burned the books. A lot of people think that only the Jews were murdered by the Nazis, sent to the concentration camps. But also, there were homosexuals, there were gypsies, there were priests, and professors. They wanted to do away with all of those people that might get in the way of their plans. And college professors were not the easiest people in the world to convince that Hitler was right. So they began to remove them, especially the ones that were able to think for themselves. She says that her brother, Professor John Stock, was arrested and disappeared. It was, I don't know how many years, she said, 5 or 6 years, that they had not heard from him anymore. And they presumed that he was dead. And that was a pretty good presumption because a lot of people in Germany knew what was going on in the concentration camps. She said, but one day, when Germany was liberated by the Allies, she was sitting on the steps in front of her house. And she said she saw in a distance a man coming, and she says, he looked somewhat familiar to me, the way he was walking, but I couldn't really see exactly who he was. And when he drew closer, he yelled out, Poldy, Lena Poldina, it's me. She said, he was alive. They couldn't believe it. And that's like the resurrection. She says he came back from the dead. That's the resurrection. To see someone who you thought was dead to come back to life. Jesus died and came back to life. How amazing. How amazing. One more story. My father died in 1997. I had a very good father, very good father. And one of my brothers, not known to be a man of great emotion, except when he was mad, he said to me one day, he says, "You know, I miss him so much. And I can't even dream about him. If I can only have a dream about him." And I looked at him, I said, "Peter, you don't have to wait for a dream. You wait for the resurrection. We'll see him again. He'll be alive, and we'll enjoy his company forever." Many of us here have lost people that we love. Father Chris lost his father right after he was ordained a priest. Right after he was ordained a priest. We know what it is to lose somebody we love. The apostles knew what it was to lose somebody that they loved. But on Easter, Jesus turned the tables. Jesus came back, and the apostles enjoyed his company forever. And the same is going to happen for us. When Jesus comes again, we're going to see all those people that we loved and enjoy their company forever. God love you. Now I got to blow my nose. This is what happens when you're Italian and you're old. Buon Pasqua.